Okay, welcome back everyone. I'll be your host for this afternoon for an exciting lineup of 3 sessions on the topic of community makerspaces. So our first speaker is the wonderful, lovely Sabrina talking about the Brisbane Tool Library. Welcome.
All right, can you hear me well? Well, thanks for those who made it here today. It's such a special and privileged thing to be within, in an event with real people around. So I started the Brisbane Tool Library in 2017, and I would like to acknowledge and thank the people in the room like Steph, Daniel, and Lorna from the State Library, because probably without your support during these years, we would not be alive and thriving as we are. So thank you for the support. I think that I didn't want to just speak about what a tool library is, but I tried to fit a more macroeconomic perspective in this presentation. So first of all, I always like to contextualize what we do as society, and if we really want to build an unsustainable society, we can keep using resources, depleting virgin resources. We can overuse stock of fishery, forest, and many other ecosystems and ecosystem services. We can create inequalities, so that the pandemic helped with that. So we're really on track on this agenda, if that's the goal of our society. And obviously with that comes also an increased risk of pandemics due to deforestation and other things. But we have to understand why we are actually facing all those social and economic problems. But I decided not to spend too much time on the problem here today. But I would like to point out that, at the root of the social and ecological issues that we are facing today, there's the current economic model, which is capitalism that aims at the infinite pursuit of economic growth. So just to put up, in a nutshell what our current system is doing, we're producing things that need to be sold and not really that are satisfying any more human needs. We live in this culture of instant gratification. And indeed, I invite you today to rethink what our needs are and why we are making things and why we should be making things, because often our needs are socially constructed. How this economic growth is implemented in our everyday life? Well, for example, with mechanisms such as planned obsolescence, so companies producing products that are made to break down. We all know that if you ever bought a printer, after 2 years, that printer doesn't work anymore. There are different mechanisms in the hardware, but also in the software sector. We saw Apple that got fined in France because the updates of the software was slowing down the iPhones themselves. So there are all different mechanisms to implement this planned obsolescence and to push consumers and people to purchase the next product. Obviously, that increases profits for companies, increases wealth for shareholders, but it comes with social and ecological cost. The United Nations is expecting 120 million tons of e-waste by 2050. So, but another thing I would like to highlight, e-waste is just post-consumer, goods. I always try to drive the attention on the virgin resource use. So, at the beginning, when we arrive at the e-waste or when we discuss recycling or other mechanism like that, it's too late already. A drill is used maximum for 3 hours per year, when a potential could be 20 hours. Unfortunately, when we talk about e-waste or electrical appliances, it's a very general category. For example, in Australia, e-waste is not defined. What do we find in that e-waste? So as a part of our work in the tool library, we go to the Brisbane recovery centers and we collect the power tools, and we are trying to take data of that e-waste, because often we connect e-waste with computers or mobile phone, etc. But what else that e-waste represent? So really briefly, there are already alternative economic models out there. The literature is rich in alternatives, and one which I really alignate with is economic degrowth. For the more politically correct, we can call it economic post-growth, which is basically a voluntary and equitable downscaling of the economy for a sustainable, just, and participatory steady-state society. Samuel Alexander, based in Melbourne, he defines it more specifically as a planned contraction of the energy and resource demand. And I would like to point out of the overgrown economy. So it's our responsibility to start undertaking this alternative economic system. And obviously the goal would be social justice and ecologically sustainability beyond consumerism and productivism. To achieve economic growth, we need to implement, frugality and simplicity. These ones are not just hippie happy terms, but they actually are concept based on need-oriented production, need-based consumption. Obviously, it involves all change of values. But the idea is to, for example, in talking about appliances, to have high quality, use-oriented products. And while capitalism taught us how to live in scarcity or how we perceive scarcity, the Digro movement would really invite people to think, how can we live in abundance with what we already have? What we also do in our work, and I will explain a bit further down on the presentation, so we should, shift our economy from selling products to providing services. So just to give you a really brief overview of where we are as a maker movement, as a tool library movement, I think we are at this meso level. So obviously at a macro level, we're talking about economic growth, degrowth. Now there are more and more terms like the donut economics, et cetera, et cetera. At the macro level, we have individual choices and daily lifestyle. But I really think that the leverage for change stays in this meso level, because I really think that communities are the real agent of change. I think that I'm not really confident that a change would happen from a top-down level, and I think that putting all the pressure of the system on individuals, that would is not actually catalyzing change. And the reason being that under the pressure of the current system, we still have to pay our bills, we still have to work for an income, etc. So we can't expect individuals to tackle these immense, huge problems by themselves. So what is a tool library and how it works, for those who don't know? So we started the Brisbane Tool Library in 2017, and at the beginning we started just collecting donations. As you can see, people would drop them wherever we were in Brisbane, so from roller skaters to food dehydrator, power tools. Then we became a bit more structured. So this is a photo of 2018, since we drive to the waste Brisbane recovery centers around Brisbane. So there's 4 waste management centers, and we collect the power tools. So this is the pickup of one afternoon, and as you can see, or probably you can't, but there are like brand new items with their boxes and instructions. So we really wanted to take this picture to give a face to that waste, because too often when we talk about waste, we think about compost or these end-of-life things that can't be used. But because of the productivist and consumerist society we live in, this is what actually waste look like. And if we want to summarize in a nutshell, the Brisbane Tool Library is built on waste, but this is the wealth of waste that we find. So other ways of collecting things has been through curbside, or more and more often people just drop their items at the tool library directly. We clean everything, so that's part of the process, and sometimes that step is enough to give a second life to the items, and other times we also have to test and tag to check obviously the safety of the electrical appliances. We then take a picture of every item, and then as a book library we have to catalog and add them in the inventory so that people are able to search them and book them. So this is, again, an old picture, but we don't have just tools. We have camping gear, we have Christmas trees, kayaks, and many other things. So we are really a library of things. Then our members pay an annual membership fee that goes from $30 now up to $75, and they can borrow as many items as they want during the year. So I will just show you a video that we did recently.
Hi, I'm Jazz, and I use the Brisbane Tool Library to make cosplay and costumes. Today I made a foam armor bracelet out of EVA foam. I used a scroll saw to get really nice 45-degree angles on the diamond to get those clean edges. I used the Dremel for smoothing down edges and to just clean up some of the lines from the scroll saw. And I used the heat gun for shaping around my arm so that it would sit nicely. My favorite thing about the Brisbane Tool Library is just how accessible it is. It's so easy to get to, it's such a central location, but more importantly, it's just so convenient. So far, I've borrowed a scroll saw, a heat gun, a Dremel, respirator mask, levelers, circular saws, all kinds of things. It's just so inviting and friendly. The people just really want to share the things that they have with you. Literally anyone, everybody should hear about it. It's great.
So beyond the advertisement kind of video, for us, I want to show you another video, but it's really to unleash and, support the potential that already exists in the community. So here, another member.
My name's Lockie Murphy. I got some tools from the Brisbane Tool Library. Now in the past what I've made is some woomers, didgeridoos, spears, clapsticks and walking sticks. I'm also a cultural teacher at the Caboolture State Primary School. I'm on a didgeridoo program now. We sit in the classroom on a mat like this. We all learn how to play the didgeridoo and I teach them breathing techniques. I couldn't have done it without borrowing the saw from the Brisbane Tool Library. I didn't have anything to cut them down and I went out to Stanford and I cut 30 pieces of bamboo and I also got a drill that drilled out them didgeridoos, so they were really helpful. It was fantastic. It was just like a library for books. It's a library for tools. People need to be aware about it and share. It's great.
So for me, that I'm probably the less creative person in the entire project. Seeing what our members do is really special, especially because we see this as a way to keep a culture alive or to promote that relocalization of the economy. Hi, I'm Sabrina, the founder of that. Not relevant. So we also organize workshops, and probably those workshops are more redirected to people such as myself, probably the generation that grew up with this consumerist culture and where, the first step would be to go and buy something ready-made rather than making or repair it or mend it. And we're really happy with our workshop programs, although we had to stop them during COVID because we saw that beyond teaching skills, we also engage with a more female population, which is often marginalized or not included enough in the makerspaces or in this kind of tools environment. Since 2018, we are based at the State Library of Queensland, which is a great location because of the location itself. But for us, it was really an important step in order to reclaim back that circular economy, that maker movement in the public sphere, and a little bit to own more and create more a community around the existing public spaces. So what are actually the tool library benefits? First of all, and probably the most important to me, is the fact that we are building, ecological sustainability. We are trying to maximize the use of those items. So we are, avoiding waste and consumption to begin with. We are reducing the need of virgin resources. We're stimulating high quality reuse. In fact, we do assure a quality of our items. Every time they come back, they are checked. And obviously, we try to invite people to reduce and repair as first steps in the waste hierarchy before recycling. We help people saving money. So often those items are underutilized or underused. For example, a Christmas tree that sits in your houses for maybe 11 months. You can just borrow it from a tool library. But also we try to, save money to those cost prohibitive items. So we have items that cost up to $600, and you might need them for one-off job. So if you can just access them, that is more convenient. And obviously that reduces also the cost to in this case, the Brisbane City Council of recovering that waste. We're also saving space of people in people's houses. There's a thing that I read recently about the Airbnb for stuff. So people are accumulating so much that now are spending money to just stock things. I guess this is a rebranding of the old-fashioned storage spaces. But obviously, if people can have access and borrow, they don't need to stock everything. Therefore, they don't need to own bigger houses, and that leads us to maybe, or invites us to rethink how we design cities. I like to think, I don't have any data, quantitative data, that two libraries could also reduce inequalities, especially in cities. And this is because it breaks that ownership culture by giving access. So everyone has equal access. We can see families in our two libraries that can borrow camping gear and have the same experience as other people that could have probably owned those items. That breaks also the dynamic of positional goods, which are those goods that we buy to feel a status, that gives us a status in the society. So we are trying to give access to useful good, and obviously by giving access and over ownership, we also can recreate resilient communities and neighborhood around those resources. The workshop part is not our main part of the activities, but as I said, we did run several ones. And obviously that is to upskill the community. Why is that important? Is that it's a bridge in between our resources that are stuck to library and people. If people don't have the skills, then they can't borrow those items. And the same probably connects to the right to repair discussion that we heard about before, because even if we have access to repairing and to spare parts and manuals, if we lack of those skills or that passion, then the right to repair is implemented just in a limited way. The workshop we organized try to teach transferable skills, which means the participant can then go in their communities and teach by themselves the skills. It creates self-confidence so that the people actually undertake repairing or maintenance. And finally, the goal would be to overcome that alienation of consumerism that we have in our society. I think this is, and I'm almost at the end, the most important part for me is that two libraries and makerspaces are commons. And the concept of commons has been misunderstood over the years in the literature. So first of all, through the commons, we can really recreate a real sharing economy and circular economy. I would not expand on that real, but it's there to differentiate ourselves from Silicon Valley companies that externalize all the social costs to their workers. We are trying through these commons to shift from consumerism to materialism. So Richard Dennis, which is an Australian author, defines consumerism as the love of buying, the love of purchasing things, and materialism as the love of materials. So he says that if we are all more materialist, then we would take care of our items and we would pass them to the next generation. So a good, healthy materialism needs to be reintroduced in our society. And then, obviously, with our work, we try to dematerialize production and consumption, which is very different from the concept of decoupling, because current circular economy movement talks about decoupling, making products more efficiently. But if the goal of the economic system remains growth, then that decoupling is not actually bringing any environmental gain. Indeed, capitalism has never been against efficiency in resources or human capital. But the commons are more than that. We define the commons as resources and assets that are taken care by a community or a network of users that have the right, those people who are part of the community have the right to use those resources. And there's a plan, there's established framework on how and to manage those resources. And why it's really important to have that plan is to contrast a little bit the understanding of the tragedy of the commons, which unfortunately is still taught in many universities. In the tragedy of the commons, the idea was there's a land or a resource without rules around it, and everyone gonna free ride it, and therefore, we need private property and regulation and everything, to manage that because humans can't manage themselves. Well, the commons is all the opposite, saying if there is a clear framework and if the community takes responsibility about these resources, then we can implement something bigger. So the commons pushes us to reevaluate and rethink human relationships. In this case, we are doing it in the city, and that would actually, be able to lead us to redesigning society metabolism, or to contracting that economy that I was mentioning before. And the important thing that brings us back to access over ownership is that these people don't have to own the things, but they still have use rights, and they still, have the potential to do anything they needed as before. The concept of commoning is important because, again, when we talk about the commons, people think things, but when we talk about commons, we think human processes, human relationships. So we can't have commons without having responsibilities around those resources. So in a book chapter that's gonna be published soon, we define those commons as not really things, but about the human process of commoning, which is a way to build social relationships. And the literature about the commons shows that maybe the cities of the future would be based on different commons, meaning that people might be members of a tool library, of a makerspace, of a community garden, and therefore our cities would be designed around the commons. Here are some books for those who would like to expand more on the macroeconomic part of it, of the steady-state economy and degrowth economy. Some references and my contact details. Thank you.